Hello, I'm Mitch. This is Keegan.
Nice to see you guys again.
And welcome to The Why.
What we will be discussing is why America is so interventionist now and why we weren't earlier, or if that should be a good thing.
That sounds very interesting. I'm looking forward to learn more.
So, think about the past, say, we're in 2019 now. So, think about the past 20 years or so. Can you just give me a running list of what you feel like the U.S. Army has gotten involved in over the past 20 years or something like that?
Over the past 20 years?
Major stuff that we would remember, kind of.
Okay, so Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
There's that thing where the Navy SEALs shot the Somalian pirates.
You can't even remember names of that.
Captain Phillips, I know him. Other stuff, probably a lot of other stuff. I feel like we have a lot of spec ops stuff like that, you know?
Mm-hmm. What about international incidents with political or otherwise?
International incidents, political or otherwise. So, like, anything political that has happened?
Not anything political, not just anything political that's happened, more along the lines of...
Like, the big stuff?
Yeah, big stuff where there was some kind of big...
like 9/11 is
Obviously.
one. That America's involved in? Is that what you're having me do?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. What else happened after 9/11? Taking out Saddam Hussein was probably a big one. How long of a list are you wanting?
Just a few examples, nothing big.
Okay. Let's do... Oh, what would be a good one? What kind of good policies have we done? Donald Trump talking to Kim Jong-un? That's interesting.
Okay, I think that should do for now.
All right.
Now, I'm going to give you a question. Feel free to think it over for a little while, because
Okay.
it's not an easy answer. It's not one that's easy to answer.
All right, we don't want dead air, so if I'm having to think about it, you got to fill time while I think.
Fair enough.
Okay.
The question of the day, the fact that about all these incidents that have happened over the past 20 years, just in general, and going further back, there was stuff like the Vietnam War and other things like that. But were we right to be involved in all of those, or did we just make it worse?
Yeah, I'd probably go... It depends on the situation. Like,
Fair enough.
Afghanistan, they've been getting screwed over since, like, forever, pretty much.
Since forever ago?
Yeah, like, not just by us, by, like, everyone. So,
Okay.
yeah, we probably definitely made the situation worse. But I don't know. There's probably stuff we've actually done that's beneficial.
So, for example, one of them you said was Saddam Hussein, and that was I didn't do enough research into that portion of it, but wasn't he the, like, leader of
That
somewhere
was,
around,
oh, crap.
was it Iran or Iraq?
It's not Iran. It's Afghanistan, I think. Isn't it Saddam Hussein? Afghanistan? Or Iraq? No, it's Iraq. It's Iraq. It's Iraq. Yeah.
Okay.
He was the dictator of Iraq.
And,
Right? Oh, crap. No, it's second guess. I think. You keep talking about it, I'll tell you.
well, either way, no matter where he was from, there was a big deal about him being particularly cruel and otherwise not a great leader for the country. So, as such, taking him out, yes, good idea. Should we have tried to do more to help stabilize the political situation?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Or is there anything that can really be done in situations like that? I mean, there's already going to be factions that in that country that are not particularly pleased with outside intervention. And you take out a leader that, yeah, most of them might not have liked, but there's still going to be a good section of people that would have preferred that to just straight out anarchy or whatever the heck is going to go on next.
To be fair, when we went to war and stuff and took him out of power, it was because he had weapons of mass destruction. But there were never weapons of mass destruction found. That was part of it. Although he was a pretty terrible person. So there's that too.
Okay. But interestingly enough, our willingness to intervene in the affairs of other countries is quite recent, actually, believe it or not.
Wow. Please elaborate.
Well, I don't. The place I'm starting at is starting after like the colonial eras, but it started even back then because we'd already separated from England, and we didn't want to have anything to do with England at the time in like early 1700s. But what I'm going to start with is and it's a fairly long quote from George Washington's farewell speech that he actually kept for a little while and then sent into a place to be read by congressmen, actually. So he wasn't actually there to make the speech. He just wrote out a good 36-page one that was...
Did you say 3 to 6 or 36?
36.
Dang, that's excessive, but okay.
Part of it was just like a farewell to the American people, saying thank you for basically letting me be your president. Thank you for helping to keep this together. And a few warnings specifically. Let's see if I can find the right one here.
Is this the one where he warns about political parties and stuff like that? Is that him that did that, or is that a different one?
Might be a different one, but I think
Okay.
he also did make a couple of mentions of making sure that we don't do something stupid like, I don't know, a civil war. Which...
Got that taken care of.
You could say that, yes. Dang, where is it? Son of shoot.
Look it up, Keegan. Look it up.
I'm working on it.
While he's looking for that, I'm gonna fill time.
There's one fact.
I don't know if we're gonna get to it today, but something that's interesting is the War of 1812. You should look that up. A tornado killed a bunch of British people who burned down Washington, D.C.
Oh, don't worry. I already have that under one of my tabs.
Oh, okay. I guess we'll be talking about it today.
Small pieces of it.
All right.
It's not going to be everything. Let's see.
Still looking up? All
Yep.
right. He's still scrolling. What else is cool about the War of 1812? One of the major battles happened after the war was already over. That's kind of interesting that just news hadn't gotten to people.
There was also a major thing going on with that being Napoleon was supposed to have been defeated, which kind of made things a little bit moot at a certain point. I think 1813 or 1814, and then he comes back the next year, and then they're like, "Hey, we need one of those ships, and we're going to take it from you."
Story of my life. Did
Really?
you find it?
Ah, yes.
All
Yes, I
right.
did.
Let's transition back into the regular programming. Here we go. Keegan, give me George Washington's farewell address.
Specifically referring to our international agreements with Britain or any other countries. The great, and quote, "The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is, in extending our commercial relations, to have with them as little political connection as possible. So far as we have already formed engagements, let them be fulfilled with perfect good faith. Here, let us stop. Europe has a set of primary interests, which to us have none or very remote relation. Hence, she must be engaged in frequent controversies, the causes of which are essentially foreign to our concerns. Hence, therefore, it must be unwise in us to implicate ourselves by artificial ties in the ordinary... No idea what that word is.
I don't know where you are. I'm just looking at
In the ordinary...
I don't. Ordinary way.
of her politics, or basically in the ordinary day-to-day of the politics of Britain's politics, or the ordinary combinations and collisions of her friendships or enmities. Our detached and distant situation invites and enables us to pursue a different course. If we remain one people under an efficient government, the period is not far off when we may defy material injury from external annoyance. When we may take such an attitude as will cause the neutrality we may at any time resolve upon to be scrupulously respected, when belligerent nations, under the impossibility of making acquisitions upon us, will not lightly hazard the giving us provocation. when we may choose peace or war as our interest guided by justice shall counsel. And do you want me to go further or no?
Oh, it's up to you. Is there more important stuff?
Not really important stuff. It's just reiterating that it's kind of stupid to not to get involved with what you're doing.
Yeah, of course.
Because at the time, Europe was still actually ruled by a king, King George the Third, I want to say.
I think that's right.
But there was
Europe or Britain, you mean?
Yeah, for
Or-
Britain.
Yeah, I think it was Britain then.
Or the British Empire, I should say, since they started to get actual holdings in Canada. They already had some in Australia and New Zealand. Ireland was a big piece of it. So, and India was starting to become a really big...
Australia, their prison.
Yes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, the War of 1812 was the last time Britain ever tried to actually make a major push at all into regaining some territory from America. Because, and that was, they were already fighting Napoleon, so they weren't exactly focused on that. And as such, for British folk, it is often considered to be a lesser, just another theater of the Napoleonic Wars.
Oh, really? That's
even,
interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't even get its own mention in their own history books.
It doesn't get much of a mention in our history books either, though, to be fair.
Well, I mean, it's not like it's really that important, honestly.
Yeah, it's a weird war, because part of what started, it had to do with, like, the British would, I forgot what the word is, but where they, like, kidnap our sailors and make them serve on their ships. And then we got upset, and we're like, "Argh!" And there's, like, trade disputes. It was basically the Phantom Menace.
Basically, yeah.
And then we invaded Canada, and then Canada's like, hey, knock that off, and they came down, and...
That's essentially the basic idea of it. There was a few major things with Cuba getting there, like us trying to purchase Cuba. There was a Cuban revolt trying to get freedom for themselves.
Yeah. Wasn't the Star Spangled Banner written during the War of 1812, though? Isn't that a thing? Francis Scott Keys? Google it real quick. I'll fill time.
What was it again?
When was the Star Spangled Banner written, our national anthem? I'm pretty sure it was the War of 1812.
Spangled Banner.
I've been to the place where he wrote it. It's pretty interesting. Actually, it's not really. It's I think it might be like a mall now or something like that. And there's a flag or maybe a monument. I don't know. I went there when I was like 10 maybe, and I'm much older than 10 now. And he's almost pulled it up. Here we go.
The words are from a poem that was written by Francis Scott Key in 1814.
Boom.
Now,
anyways, you can continue what you were saying.
Yeah. But there was a lot of stuff going on with how Cuba was trying to get its independence. Puerto Rico was officially declared as a U.S. province, not a state. And Britain officially moved off into other areas. But yeah. Going back to what... going back to where we were talking about King George and the fact that he was ruling there.
Got it.
There was a lot of issues with him. Reportedly, he was, like, not mentally together.
Was that the 3 or was that 4 that was, like, Mad King George? Because there's one that they called, like, Mad King George.
Whichever one it was the one that was dealing...
There at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Partially because...
Incest?
Yes,
Incest.
lots of it. Lots and lots and lots of it.
Mm-hmm. Got to keep that royal blood pure. Plug for Crusader Kings 2. Play it. You got to do that.
But it is not kind of a fun period because that lasted all the way up into the First World War. But
inbreeding? Is that what you're saying? It lasted?
Yes.
Yeah. The World War One, it was like just the leaders were all cousins and crap.
Basically, yeah, except for Woodrow Wilson. But anyway, the War of 1812 is also considered for us to be the Second War of Independence because England was trying to like put naturalized Americans into service, and some of them didn't have the papers properly because for whatever reason we didn't want to we had a reluctance to actually put them together. We're just like, here we are, have fun.
Yeah, we didn't really have our act together very well.
But it still isn't any excuse. Mm-hmm. But from there up until there was the Civil War in 1860 to 1863? 4.
I want to say 4, I think.
And then Lincoln was assassinated right after everything got kicked in. Mm-hmm. So we had a couple of things there which we didn't really learn from, but that was more of a
I'd say
mistake.
we learned from it a bit. We stopped having slaves.
Fair. Well, I mean, yeah, to a point. We did learn some of it, but it was very reluctant and took a good century before there were other reforms that actually allowed for people of color to, have proper human rights like they should have had all along, instead of us being awful. Just awful.
Yeah, I agree. It did take way too long. Kind of don't have the best history with minorities.
No. Then again, does any people out there?
America's pretty bad. America's pretty bad.
Yeah, we were pretty bad.
We did commit a genocide.
But
and enslave people. And there's the whole, putting, the Japanese in internment camps.
That happened in the 1950s, or in the 1940s, when the World War II was going on. But,
yeah, it's still pretty bad. America's not exactly great.
Right. No other country is doing as well as they would like to, I feel like, but we still have a long way to go to even match up with them.
I feel like we're getting better, yeah.
Very slowly and with a lot more violence than I would have really liked.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's fair.
As they say, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, every day would be Halloween.
They sure do say that.
And by they, I mean my mother.
Okay.
But during the 19th century, there was a lot of stuff going on. There was for us internally, so we didn't have much of a chance to actually get involved anywhere else. The two bookends were the War of 1812, which is kind of a small war in and of itself, but and then you have the Spanish-American War, which there were a few things that went on with that. There was some problems with how there was a ship that was sunk at least once, like a major ship sunk by
oh crap, what is it called?
Spaniards.
I can't pull it. I know what you're talking about though. It has that
the USS Maine. So
yeah,
it was about 10 months or so, and during the time Cuba was actually fighting a war of independence. So we got involved in that, and Spain was not particularly pleased, but it was minor again, mostly minor.
We got a lot of land for that though. That's why Puerto Rico's a territory, and the Philippines until recently.
Which kind of plays into how Europe fought its wars in a lot of different cases. Aside from the Napoleonic Wars, which were massively destructive and rather horrifying for the royalty that was there, most of it was built around just small wars where, the public might not even know that a war was happening, and if they did, they didn't particularly care because it wasn't affecting them. They just had small armies, and the way it was explained, I heard this a while back, is that it was, if anything, gentlemanly warfare, if there is ever such a thing.
You line up and you shoot at each other. Yeah.
What?
You line up and then you shoot at each other. Yeah.
And you just exchange small provinces, and leaders could actually have fun going to war without seeming, shall we say, bloodthirsty and insane.
And then machine guns happened.
Well, even then, there was a war that happened in Africa that was called the Boer War because there was some British folk that were actually ported down to, not like the region of, like a fairly quiet region of Africa. It would have been somewhere close to Madagascar or something like that.
Okay.
On the actual mainland of Africa, on that side. Yeah. And they decided that they wanted to make their own country and province, and then things got involved there. There was actually a British kind of line that was used as a colonial proverb, which was considered to have gone, whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun, and they have not, which is a reference to the prototypes of machine guns. And this was also in the 1890s. But that's basically the way that things went for Europe's wars, except for Napoleon's wars, which was kind of its own thing. That could be an interesting tangent all on its own, because of his invasion of Russia and what was required and stuff like that.
Yeah. That would be interesting to get into sometime. For sure.
Right. Now, there were a couple other wars that were happening, like up from like 1898 up till 1905 was the first time that Europe and really got into a major war, because Napoleon kind of introduced them to full on, like, you want a war, here's a war. I've got every single person I can enlisted.
Yeah.
And part of his spiel was when he was talking to a diplomat, I don't remember from where. One of his lines was that he bragged that you cannot stop me. I spend 30,000 lives a month.
Dang. Yeah, that's crazy.
And at the time, it was a big number.
Yeah, now that's a big number.
Fair, but part of that was just the simple idea of the fact that he was enlisting every single person, no matter if they were poorly trained or not.
Yeah.
So, and that scared the European royalty, because realistically, that was the last thing you wanted. You didn't want your population trained and ready to go to war.
Yeah.
You wanted to make sure you could keep them under control. But
Feudalism.
1905 was like the time where the weapon systems that were designed in the past century or so were tested somewhat, or at least the land stuff, with Japan going up against Russia and winning. Though, of course, the deal they got, because they were in such bad economic straits afterwards, because it requires a lot of stuff, a lot of industrial stuff, a lot of money to run a war against a large country like Russia.
Yeah.
But they were able to rip apart Russia's navy in one big battle, basically.
Dang.
And most people at the time had severe racism involved. They thought that a Oriental people would not be able to match up to a Anglo-Christian state like Russia was at the time, and those ideas were swiftly proven wrong. Teddy Roosevelt, who he helped settle the two sides to a deal that saw more of a draw between the two rather than a win for Japan, which leads into the Second World War, but that's further down the line. But again, America didn't really do all that much. There wasn't much going on, and that included all the way up until the First World War, where Europe really got just stunned. There's figures that would just blow your mind to hear, honestly.
Like death tolls, is that what you're saying?
Death tolls, amounts of shells that were fired off. There's several battles in there that are crazy. Death totals, there was the first major contact the French army had with Germany in 1914. There was 26,000 dead French people.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In one day.
There's a reason they called it the Great War.
And then it got blown out of the water by its next one, kind of.
Yeah.
But 2.5 years into the war, Woodrow Wilson had managed to keep the U.S. out of war, or it was more like a year and a half, something like that. And he had a campaign coming up, which kind of depended on whether he could actually keep the U.S. out of the war. There was a lot of stuff going on there, and part of it was due to the fact that you don't want to send a good amount of your young people over to Europe to fight in a war where you're not going to gain anything unless you absolutely have to.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So, pieces of that would include, being able to do, they did loans and stuff to everybody they could loan out to, basically.
Yeah.
And sold their stuff to absolutely everybody who could get it, which didn't include Germany because there was a blockade going on.
Yeah.
But they were neutral, but more tending towards the side of the Allies, and then the Germans looking for any edge they could get, which is another interesting idea. But the edge that they were looking for was using submarines to kind of force Britain to its knees, and there was a certain point where they did unrestricted submarine warfare, which started taking down every ship on the seas that was not German.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that included a lot of ships that we were sending across, and that kind of made tensions with Germany rise severely. Mm-hmm. Because you're losing a couple hundred people maybe every several months to German attacks, and usually Woodrow Wilson and his cabinet would go, guys, you really need to stop this, and then they relax this stuff. They kind of throttle it back a little bit, tensions would drop, and then it would happen again. And so, essentially, like, we were still very non-interventionist, and there was a major piece of the country, and even today now, if you count ancestry and stuff like that, but back then especially, you have a lot of just people who were born in Europe who had moved over. So, you have German Americans or Irish Americans, specifically, that were fighting to keep the U.S. neutral.
Yeah.
And most people were not really wanting to get involved in a war.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets reelected and then starts trying to make some peace offers. There's a famous speech of his that got released, the 14 Points, it's called.
Yeah. You should explain it, though, for the listener.
Okay. So, the 14 Points was a particular speech that Woodrow Wilson gave to basically to the world. He was making it like in front of his own Congress people, of course, but that was given over to the European governments as a way of showing what kind of peace would be required to settle the First World War. You can't have what actually did happen if you want to have a lasting, strong peace that will not fracture later on. And part of those includes, like, not making... It sounds absolutely ridiculous even now, because part of it is including making open declarations of peace, like making sure that you're not hiding stuff.
But real quick, the coolest social studies project thing I've ever had in high school, freshman, it's like world whatever, the one where you study, like, World War I and II and all that junk. We hadn't talked about World War I at all yet, right? And so the teacher has us get into groups, and we're a nation, and he has like a map that he projected up on the wall, and there's like a set amount of resources, and he says, okay, I forgot what the resources was, but it was like, say, trees, oil, and gold or something like that, and you have to have at least one of each, and all the nations don't have one of each. So then there's like, you all meet, and then you talk as your your nation, and then you can make allegiances, like defensive pacts and stuff, but in secret. And so everybody's making all these pacts in secret, and you don't know what's going on, and you want to be protected. And so you're like, okay, we'll make a pact with you, and you'll make a pact with you. And then there's like the next round. It was, I think, like, you could declare war and stuff, and like try and seize the resources. And so we'd be like, okay, we're going to declare war on, like, whatever, this nation, and we're taking that gold because we need that gold. And then he tallied up, like, everyone who declared war, and then he ran, like, a little simulation thing where he's like, okay, so they declared war on here, but these two people have, like, a defensive pact, which goes and they declare war on you, and it, like, just made a world war that we were like, oh no, what do we do? It was great.
And that's the big deal about what happened in World War I. There was a lot of unrest. There was a lot of problems with just political alliances, which Otto von Bismarck, actually, the famous German diplomat, ended up creating a massive web of alliances where it's too expensive and costly for anyone to get into war, because then you drag everybody else into it.
Yeah.
Now, the important detail of why Germany even did what it did was because they were stupid and drove off the Russians, which at the time seemed very stupid, and it really was.
Yeah.
Because you're taking the largest power in the world, not necessarily the best, but it's got the largest amount of people in it.
Yeah.
And turning it into an enemy, and you're already not exactly on good terms with France, and so Germany is now kind of surrounded, which kind of caused a couple of different things in there, but that's, again, a tangent for another day. So, America became kind of the resources and suppliers of all the countries that were in the wars. And kind of the submarine warfare broke out, and that drags the U.S. into the war, but...
there's also the Zimmerman telegram, too. That was a big part of it.
Yes, that's the other important detail, which Germany's... foreign secretary, I believe it was. The Secretary of Foreign Relations or something like that. Ryan Zimmerman? Or not Ryan Zimmerman, but...
Probably something like Hans Zimmerman.
Zimmerman telegram. Hang on. Got this on here. Zimmerman telegram.
Are you gonna read it? Or...
From Washington to Ambassador Heinrich von Eckert. He was the receiver of that guy.
Oh,
he was in the German embassy for Mexico at the time.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean.
So,
yeah, okay.
German Foreign Secretary Arthur Zimmermann. He sent a particular telegram that kind of that undercut a lot of the reasoning why most of America didn't want to go to war, simply because they were using the U.S. telegram cable, which the U.S. had specifically commissioned to say, if you want to talk to us or talk to people here for peace terms only, go ahead. We're more than glad to let you use our telegram, which, other context is that when the war began, French and British folks actually cut the German lines so they couldn't actually use their own telegrams. They had to borrow other people's and use them.
You should probably talk about what the telegram was about, because it was about, like, hey, Mexico.
I know. But the Dakota telegram is as follows. Quote, we intend to begin on the 1st of February unrestricted submarine warfare. We shall endeavor, in spite of this, to keep the United States of America neutral. In the event of this not succeeding, we make Mexico a proposal of alliance on the following basis. Make war together, make peace together, generous financial support, and an understanding on our part that Mexico is to reconquer the lost territory in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. The settlement in detail is left to you. You will inform the President of the above most secretly as soon as the outbreak of war with the United States of America is certain, and add the suggestion that he should, on his own initiative, invite Japan to immediate adherence, and at the same time mediate between Japan and ourselves. Please call the President's attention to the fact that the ruthless employment of our submarines now offers the prospect of compelling England in a few months to make peace. Signed, Zimmerman. End quote.
It'd be interesting if that would have happened. Like, I feel like America would have taken down Mexico.
Not without losing a lot of people. And the important detail here...
We kind of whooped them once, though. We kind of whooped them real good.
Either way, the big deal with that is not necessarily that Germany is gaining a major ally in the war.
But it's distracting us.
It has us send troops to somewhere where it's not... like where the Germans are not having to worry about fighting more and more enemies on more fronts, because they were already dealing with a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that, along with the unrestricted U-boat warfare, dragged the U.S. into the war. The context around the Zimmerman telegram, though, is that, first off, the British they were the ones who intercepted that telegram, and they then had the sticky situation of trying to figure out, how do you tell the U.S. this is going on without inviting a lot of other questions like, where'd you get the telegram?
Oh, yeah.
So they had to kind of wait for a little while and just figure out, how do we make this believable, that we didn't just tap into your lines and,
Yeah.
But they did that, and then Arthur Zimmerman stepped forward and said the telegram is real twice. And the second time, there's a specific response where he had said specifically that...
was it specific?
Yeah. He told an American journalist, I cannot deny it is true, on the 3rd of March, and then 29th of March in the same year, he gave a speech in the Reichstag in which he admitted the telegram was genuine. He said he hoped Americans would understand the idea was that Germany was only to enact that if the United States got into the war. You'd understand then, right?
Yeah.
No, that made a lot of people very angry, and it kind of led the U.S. to go to war in April. And there was a specific there was a specific reason why they'd waited this long, and it was connected to kind of a mythology that we do not get involved in Europe's wars ever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can make a lot of money just sitting back and selling stuff to people at war, which It's kind of what America's about, is making money. Now we're just good at making money from war.
I mean, the Iron Man movies prove that you can be pretty good at being a merchant of death.
Yeah. And just real life, too.
Mm-hmm. Hang on. Let me see if I can look this one up. So, speech to Congress, specifically. I have to look up a particular website for this one.
Do you mean to fill time?
Nope, I think I have it right here. And he's giving a speech based around...
Who's he?
Woodrow Wilson.
Woodrow Wilson, all right.
26th President of the United States. He steps forward to Congress, and the way his speech goes about it is essentially understanding the situation that they're in. Mm-hmm. There's a little blurb about him saying, now, we're not angry with Germany's people. This is a monarchy, basically. So they don't really have any say in what's going on the top floors. So they're just the ones kind of stuck having to do everything. Mm-hmm. So we're not mad at you. We're mad at the government, specifically, which we've done multiple other times as well, including quite recently. But there's a particularly large segment here where he starts going on about he starts taking on the whole idea of a mythology that we have that's connected to not getting involved in Europe's wars, which also connects back to a speech by John Quincy Adams, and the famous line that America goes not abroad in search of monsters to slay. So I had the quote pulled up at a previous time, but it's no longer relevant because it was done in the 1790s, so...
You could argue it has some sort of relevance. It's America. America's not that old.
Fair. But that one, it was essentially... It essentially kind of communicated, if we get involved, our policies are not going to be about peace anymore. They're not going to be about helping to get other countries freedom. They're going to be about taking over ourselves.
Yeah.
And doing it that way. And I'm not doing it any justice at all. I'm just paraphrasing it. Look it up if you have the time. It is quite fascinating. However, there's the one there. Almost there.
All right. Here comes Woodrow Wilson with a quote about why we should stay neutral.
Or why that time has passed.
That time has passed, and we are no longer neutral. So suck on that, John Quincy Adams.
Let's see. I'm trying to figure out the exact one here. So, and I'm sorry about this.
Here, I can fill time. Just let me know. Just give me a little nod when you're ready. Or, we can always cut stuff. But I kind of like the podcasts that have that, like, more casual vibe where you hear the behind the scenes stuff of the people talking about it. So maybe this will be our, token scene. All right, he's doing his nod. Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Quote, neutrality is no longer feasible or desirable where the peace of the world is involved and the freedom of its peoples, and the menace to that peace and freedom lies in the existence of autocratic governments backed by organized force, which is controlled wholly by their will, not by the will of the people. So, to explain, essentially, we had a tradition of not getting involved.
Mm-hmm. Unless fruit companies are involved.
What's that?
I said unless fruit companies are involved.
We just forget about those.
Okay. Continue.
So we used to not get involved ever unless it was around freedom or
money,
stuff like that.
Money, the freedom to make money. Yes. That's what it is. The freedom to make money.
And even 1896, or 1898, I should say, not 1896. I get that so mixed up. But 1898, even that was just kind of small stuff. It wasn't England; it was specifically Spain that we got involved with. But
yeah.
We used to not be interventionist. Times have changed. They lived in a different era. We can't just sit back and watch millions of people die. For governments that are all too callous towards ensuring their own power.
Yeah.
So that kind of was a big nail in the coffin, and the vote was something like 390 something to 70 something. In favor of going to war. Yeah. And the important thing is how he sets up the speech how Woodrow Wilson set up the speech is that he never gives the impression that Congress has any real choice in the matter, believe it or not.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
Because the way he's saying it is that it's not declare a war against Germany so that we'll be at war with Germany. It's we are in a war with Germany right now, as evidenced by the fact that we are losing citizens to their submarine planning, and as such, I invite you to confirm that fact with me.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And even then, we didn't really show people what we could do, because, we got involved, early 1917, April, we started arming. We didn't get there until 1918, and so we were involved in less than 10 months the whole war. Which...
We only use 10% of our power. Regular little anime thing. Just
yeah.
Just give them a taste, and then we'll go Super Saiyan later.
Which, part of the reason why everybody was so happy America got involved, except for Germany and its allies, was that Russia had just gone through a massive revolution, which, again, fascinating stuff, except for the fact that the royal family got executed, but,
Yeah.
through no good reason. I mean, the Tsar was perfectly willing to give up power, basically, at a certain point. He was more concerned about his kids.
You can learn all about that if you watch the movie Anastasia.
I feel like you're giving false advertising
No,
here.
it is. Rasputin, he could put his head inside of his chest cavity. That is historical fact.
I mean, there's, legends about how he would not die.
He didn't. No, that's a real thing, dude. It took so much to kill him. They gave him cyanide. He had built up an immunity to cyanide. And then I think, what is it? Didn't they shoot him and
The exact
stuff?
recollection is that, there's most of the court didn't really like him. The ones that did kind of considered him to be something of a...
He's a creep. Have you seen a picture of him? He looks like a real creep.
They considered him to be some kind of exotic animal.
Yeah, he's a weirdo. He's a real weirdo. And if you look up the stuff he's into, he is a weirdo.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. It's very, very, very interesting.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, I was just thinking, we might want to do a two-parter, because I feel like you got a long ways to go, right? Because we're at World War I right now,
right.
And you don't want to go to modern, right?
Up to the modern age and kind of see what compare and contrast.
So this might be our first two-parter. We'll see. I'll see where I cut it.
Okay. So, but the basic idea is just going to be that even when we were still arming and stuff like that in World War I, we weren't doing a good job of it. That we weren't as industrialized.
Yeah.
And then there was the November 11th treaty that got the World War to end, which is November 11th, obviously, which is where we get Veterans Day, actually.
Yeah. Wasn't it the 11th hour, 11th minute? They went all crazy with 11s.
It was on the 11th day of the 11th month, November 11th, 1918, or 11 a.m., November 11th, 1918, the war had officially ended. There's a pretty cool quote. I'm trying to remember the exact one, but the way that I heard this from a previous podcast, actually. But I don't remember where I got the quote either. But essentially, at 2 minutes to 11, there was a German gunner on a stretch of trenches who was seen to fire off a belt without pause, like a full machine gun belt without pause. He was then seen to stand up, take off his helmet, bow, and walk slowly to the rear. There was a second of expectant silence, and then there was a sound much like a soft wave.
A sound like a soft wave?
Yes, like a soft gust of wind, almost.
Oh, okay.
And people far behind the line heard that, and the exact sound was of men cheering from the Vosges to the sea.
Wow.
The exact armistice was arm twisting and stuff like that, and Germany had to give up a lot of stuff because they'd taken a lot of territory from France and been battered back for the last 3 months. They were just kept getting smashed over and and over, but they didn't break. The important detail, because had they broken, Germany would have basically been eviscerated. Just for the sake of getting a little bit more in the way of honor and junk like that. But the exact armistice, when a couple of people took a look at it, especially political advisors, One of them, I don't remember the name, but he had said, "This isn't peace. This is a 20-year armistice."
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And he was almost perfectly right if you count according to, like...
There's
not
a cat
necessarily...
in here. Sorry, people who are listening.
According to, like, some people, a lot of people, the Second World War started in 1939, so he was, like, 1 year off, basically.
Dang.
However, some other people include the Japanese War against Manchuria and China and Korea, all that, like the Eastern War.
Yeah, yeah.
So, with that said, it's about 20 years, thereabouts.
20 years. Do you want to do? We could do this. Do part 2, World War II and modern era.
Ooh.
Do you want to do that? Because it seems like a good spot. This is about the length our last episode was.
Well, how far are we in?
How far are we in?
Yeah.
Oh, this is like about the average length. Do we want to do part 2? We could just do it right now. I'll just say tune in next time for part 2, and we'll start it back up.
Might as well.
All right. Stick around for next week. I'm Mitch. This was Keegan.
And we will be back with the finale to the U.S. traditions about interventionism and otherwise.
See ya next week. Bye-bye.